children's church today? We're doing children's church. All right, children's church. That way. So it's my privilege to introduce and to welcome Corey Hise. Is that right? Did I say that right? Okay. From Liberty, and again, we can't thank Liberty and them enough. If you introduce your guests, and come on, preach what the Lord's put in your heart.
Hello, Calvary. How are you doing? All right. Good. Well, I'm Corey Hise. I brought my girlfriend and some friends from Liberty along with me. Can you hear me? Is it working?
You're not on.
It's working. It's not working. It is working. Okay. Well, okay. So I'm Corey. Just a little bit about me. I'm from Lexington, Kentucky. So go Wildcats. I don't know if anybody likes that, but that's where I'm from. I just moved to Columbia, South Carolina, so I guess go Gamecocks, but I'm kind of new there. And I go to Liberty University. And just to get it straight, I love Jesus. I love his church. I love the gospel. And I love preaching. I feel like he's called me to it. And I genuinely feel that the sermon that he's given me today and the sermon tonight, I feel that he can genuinely change each and every one of our lives with the truth. All right. So, on top of Jesus, there are a couple other things I love. I love my family. I love my girlfriend. I love the Dallas Cowboys. I'm a big Cowboys fan. I think John loves them too. And I love seafood. That's just my thing. If I ever get a chance to eat seafood, that's where I'm going. Crab and clam chowder are my thing. Any type of crab, any type of clam chowder. And speaking of clam chowder, so about a couple months ago, me and my girlfriend would rotate about 3 restaurants, and I remember they had kind of a special, a deal for clam chowder, and I was pretty excited because this is something I don't get to eat often. It's kind of expensive for something that's before you eat your entree. And I remember I got all excited. I was talking to Ashley the whole way over. That's her name. I was talking to her all the way over, and I remember I'm getting all excited. The waiter comes over, and I'm like, man, I don't even know what entree I want, but I know that I want some clam chowder. She's like, do you want me to bring it out early? I'm like, as early as you possibly can. And I remember I'm getting all excited. And I remember she comes over. I got my stuff ready. I remember she hands it to me. I got my 3 packets of little crackers, and I pour it all in there. And I remember looking at it. I'm like, okay, it looks weird, but it tastes good. It's clam chowder. I remember I took a bite, and I went, that's terrible. It was the worst clam chowder. It was it wasn't soupy, but it was clumpy. And the worst part, it was sour. When I say sour, I mean kind of stung a little bit. I was like, well, that's not good. And the weird thing is I'm pretty confrontational as a person. I'm pretty bold, pretty loud, pretty talkative. And for some reason, I feel really mean if I tell a waitress or a waiter that I don't like food. It's really uncomfortable for me. I don't know why. It's one of the only places in the world that I'm going to just, oh, yeah, it's great. I'm going to pay for it. It's no problem. And I remember she kept coming over. She's like, how's the food? I'm like, it's great. Terrible. I remember I just keep, yeah, it's great. And I remember we're getting towards the end, and I'm telling Ashley, I'm like, yeah, it doesn't taste good. And she's like, look, worst comes to worst, they say no. But most likely they're going to take it off your bill or get you a new one. What could go wrong? And I remember I was like, okay, I'm going to get my confidence up. I got all ready. She came over. She's like, anything I can do? Nope, I'm great. And I bombed it again. And I remember the food's about to come out, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, you know what? Why not? Because I looked at the price of it, and I was like, you know what? Why not at least try it? And I remember she came over, and I was like, as nice of a way as I possibly could, I was like, yeah, this doesn't taste great. She was like, oh, I'm so sorry. So not was she nice, but she was so sorry about it. She was like, of course, I'll get you one, and I can take it off your bill. I'll do whatever you want. She went and got me a new bowl, and I remember she brought it over, and I was kind of hesitant this time, and it was great. I remember I put my stuff in, I loved it, I ate it in 20 seconds, that's my thing. I love clam chowder. And the moral of that silly story is that me stepping out of my comfort zone was worth it. It was awkward for me, well, not really risky, but it was uncomfortable. It was definitely not something that I would have preferred to do, but it was worth it. And over the last couple of weeks, when I've been preparing for this talk, I was realizing, well, that's silly. I realized we do that with our walk with Jesus all the time. it's so hard for me to step out of my comfort zone in my spiritual life? Like, even when I know what God has promised, and God has promised what he'll do, or what he'll say, or how he'll respond, why do I still not want to step out my comfort zone, even though I know I'll reap a reward for it? It'll be better. Like, he promises to bless us if we tithe. And I remember, but why then do I struggle to tithe, knowing that God will bless it? And the good news is, the reason that we cave to our comfort, the question, it's been an age-old question. In fact, it's got an age-old answer. And I was thinking about it, and it reminds me of a passage in Matthew. But let me set the background first before we jump all in, which is fun. Jesus has just finished preaching to 5,000 men, so people think 10 to even 15,000 people. And he's performed a miracle where he turned 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish into 5,000 men to eat. Like, literally, he fed 5,000 men. People think it was also women and children. And there were 12 full baskets left over. And this wasn't like a little basket. It was like a triple hamper or something. It was like their baskets back. Like, the idea would have been that it was almost like 4 or 5 feet tall, how big these baskets were. It was a lot of food. So nobody could say he didn't multiply it. Like, you can't hide 10,000 people's food. He really did it. And all these people get really excited. The disciples get all fired up. All the people get fired up. And it says that Jesus had to slip out and send them all home because they were about to force him to become king. And he's like, I don't want to be king. I'm sending him out because, as we all know, he's a king of not of this earth. He's a king of heaven. That's where he is. And his kingdom's in not of this world. And so he's all forcing them out. And he's like, no, like, go home. You can come see me preach again sometime soon. He doesn't really specify. And he sends his disciples. He says, look, you go from, he's on the west side, or the east side, and he sends them all the way to the west. And this is like a thing, like, this is kind of a big thing because 6 chapters earlier, it would have been a couple months, the disciples had just been on the Sea of Galilee with Jesus. He was asleep, and the waves got really, really bad, and they thought they were going to die. Like, straight up, they were like, this is it, we're all dead. They woke him up, he calmed the wind and the waves. Huge, right? So the disciples are kind of worried. They're like, I don't really want to go over the sea without you, Jesus. And he says, no, you guys go. I'll catch up to you later. I got to go talk to my dad. So Jesus, get this picture, heads up on this mountain where he can talk with God. Now, the Sea of Galilee, you got to understand, is like, basically, there's a surrounding valley. He's like in a little circle valley. It's down here, and there's hills all around. It's actually the lowest lake on earth. It's 700 feet below sea level. And all these different mountains are about 2,000 feet higher than it. So everywhere around can see onto the Sea of Galilee. And he sends them down. And then also you gotta understand, because of that, like, geography or whatever it is, the wind can come and like within the span of like literally 5 minutes, it can get like crazy on the Sea of Galilee. Like the water can go crazy. There could be storms. They said that there were storms that had waves up to 22 feet. Like, people would die. It was a pretty violent storm. And they're kind of nervous. And so he sends them down across. So now that you kind of get it, they're a little nervous. Sea of Galilee's pretty dangerous, especially at nighttime where they were going. And Jesus sent them, and Jesus had a plan. So let's pick it up. We're in Matthew 14, verse 23 is where I'll start. By the way, when you hear my story and you wonder, where's the second half of the story? That's tonight, so you should come back. It'll be fun. But, all right, it should also be on the screen if you want to follow. But, all right. So, verse 23. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone. And the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, they would have thought this was about 3 a.m., 3 or 4, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. Now, before we delve into Peter, I want you to look at, in verse 27, you can see Jesus says, "Take courage, it is I." Now, we're Americans. We lived 2,000 years after this. Hebrew, Old Testament, we don't really understand the culture. But what he's saying here, the word he's using in the original language would have been, "I am." He's saying, it is God. It's Yahweh. This is the God of your ancestors, the God of the Old Testament. This is big. Like, they would have killed him for this. Like, Pharisees would have actually wanted him dead just for saying that. So, like, I'm going to shoot back to Exodus 3:13-14 to show you the power of this word. Just real quick, you don't have to go to it. But it says, Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you.' And they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" God says to Moses, "I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you." Now this is big. Because Jesus is not just saying, yeah, Jesus of Nazareth that you think was born of Mary and Joseph is here, the human, but God himself is here. Yahweh is here. And what we see is something beautiful, verse 28. Peter says, "Lord, if it's you." The first thing is, he says Lord, which means he's acknowledging that he believes it. He's saying, okay, I believe you. And then he's saying, "Tell me to come to you on the water." Now there's two amazing things. The first one I mentioned is he immediately chose to believe it. We don't know about the rest of the disciples. In fact, we kind of get the idea that they don't know if it's still Jesus. Peter chooses to believe it. Peter chooses to trust it. But then there's a second spot. Something that I don't do in my life often, that I would better say that a lot of us don't do, is Peter asks God to speak to him. He invites God's voice into his life. And this, I think, is the first step of being courageous in our faith with God. It means to invite God's voice into your life. Notice, Peter doesn't just invite God's input. He doesn't just say, God, I'll hear you. You say something, and then I'll kind of think about it and go with it. He says, no, God, you speak, and I'll listen. He's like committing to listen. It's kind of what inviting God's voice looks like. He asked this question completely out of faith. He's not asking it out of, he sees God. There's kind of this concept that he probably couldn't really see God well. He probably couldn't really tell that it was Jesus. Probably couldn't even really hear him very well. But he chose out of faith to trust that it was God. The thing is, he knows that it's a hard, it's a dangerous, it's a risky, it's a scary situation. I mean, he looks at it. It's not like the storms went away. In fact, the idea would have been the later it got at night, the storms would have got worse. Been the worst by morning, actually, by dawn. So the storms, the winds, the waves, they got worse. But Jesus has Peter believing him. Now, this made me think, how often do I purposely not ask God to speak in my life? Now, I don't purposely go, God, don't speak to me. Nobody does that. But what we do is, if we pass a homeless person, okay, how often do we purposely not ask God what we should do? I mean, if I see a homeless person, I might not say, God, make it clear that I'm not supposed to give to him. But what I might say is nothing. I might just purposely kind of look away or purposely not think about it. Maybe it's a waitress or a waiter that's had a bad day, and you can tell, and I purposely don't ask God about what I should maybe tip them. Or maybe, this one's tough for me, is you hear put your hand up if you want to support a kid, whether it's in Africa or something. You purposely go, okay, I'm not going to pray about that one because I don't want to give $40 a month. And we kind of just don't pray about it. We don't ask. Because when Peter's asking, what he's doing is, he's saying, I'm asking you, and what you say I'll trust. What you say I'll do. Which is real tough because we don't like to do that. I don't like to do that. It comes down to a willingness. It comes down to, I have to be willing to trust God when I invite him in. And thinking about this, I'm kind of drawn by the disciples, okay? So if you kind of think about this situation. So Peter is kind of like the dope of the group. Like, he's kind of like, they kind of think he's a little dumb. They kind of think he's a little crazy. He's the only one who's married with kids. He's like probably at least 10 years older than most people there. There's a couple of them maybe near him, but he's kind of old. He's kind of like the guy in the group that they're like, yeah, he's not really thinking straight. That was kind of their idea of Peter. And I can kind of imagine when they're in the storm, like let's just say the waves are like 10 feet. They can supposedly go over 20, but let's say it's at 10. And they're kind of all freaked out, and they're looking at Peter, and they're like, what, bro? You want to get off the boat? I can just kind of imagine, John, like, I'll take his tunic when he's gone. I can imagine, like, maybe Bartholomew, he doesn't get much airtime, so he's going for it all. He's like, I'll take his boat. And then some of them are like, I can imagine, like John, or not John, maybe Philip, he's kind of one that was kind of risky, kind of did his thing. I can see him be like, I'll take his fishing net and his fishing hook. I can kind of see them all betting about. But then I see him getting to Andrew. Now, if you don't know, Andrew was one of Jesus' disciples, but he was also Peter's brother. And he loved him. They have a close relationship. You can see it all through. I can kind of see them all around joking, making little selfish jokes. I can see Andrew kind of grabbing Peter like, what are you doing? Like, you have kids. You could literally die. What are you doing? Like, this is way too dangerous for you. Like, you need to stay safe. You have people to worry about in your life. What are you doing? And I can kind of see Peter looking at him saying, man, get off. Like, it's Jesus. Like, I got to take this chance. Like, what if it's Jesus? And that kind of moved me because I'm thinking, I got a brother. And if he was on a boat and he was about to get off, I would say, what are you, get back here. Like it's not safe at all. What are you doing? Like, the idea was you could die if you got in the water. You could die. And Andrew, I can just imagine, is hurting for his brother and wants to go, it could be Jesus, but you got to stay safe. It'd be better, he'll forgive you, it'll be okay, just stay in the boat. It'll be okay. And what I think is amazing is Jesus' response to Peter. So, all these disciples are probably holding Peter back like, what is this guy talking about? Like, why in the world would you try to get off the boat? And I can just kind of imagine him. And then Jesus just says in one word, he said, come. Verse 29 says, come. That's all Jesus says. Jesus doesn't say, yeah, Peter, son of Jonah, brother of Andrew, whose mother-in-law I healed in Capernaum, from Bethsaida. He doesn't go, okay, I'm going to prove it. Like, if it's God, I probably want him to, like, kind of maybe say a little more to prove that it's God before I jump out of a boat. Like, I'd be like, yeah, like, what did we eat the other day? Like, I would kind of ask some of those things to prove, like, okay, this isn't just a ghost. Like, but what Jesus does, he leaves it in Peter's court. He leaves the decision to Peter. He doesn't try to persuade him. He doesn't try to convince him. He doesn't say, I'm Jesus, son of Mary and Joseph. My brother's on the boat. Like, he doesn't say all this. He just says, come. And this is powerful. Because Peter then is left with the decision. Peter's the one that gets to decide, okay, I got this guy who's telling me to jump out of a boat right now. And I got all my buddies that don't want me to. I got to make a decision. He doesn't have God showing up on the boat, speaking right to him, showing him a vision of Ezekiel. He doesn't have a big moment. It's just a come. And Peter gets to choose. Which brings me to my second point, which is trust God's voice over all other voices. Because in our lives, we all know it, there are selfish people in our lives. People that'll say selfish, silly things. Just kind of joke around. Like, God called you to be a missionary. They're like, yeah, you gonna do that. I'll take your car while you're over there. You know what I'm saying? Think little stuff. But there are also well-meaning people in our lives. People that love us. Parents, brothers, sisters, mentors, teachers. People that are close to us. Who might give us worldly, wise advice, counsel. And not saying that we shouldn't listen to that, but there's also times that people, well-meaning people, can give us advice, stuff that we think is directly, like, smart advice that even we believe to be from God, but they contradict what God said. Because the truth is, sometimes you have to trust the quiet, unclear voice of God. Sometimes it's going to be unclear. Sometimes it's going to be tough. And sometimes we got to say, God, I kind of don't want to right now. I kind of would rather just say I didn't really hear you, or I don't really know what you're saying. But by faith, I'm going to trust what you say. Now, you might be saying, okay, cool. Lots of people get bad advice. You know, soccer moms, they're famous for giving bad advice. You know, you get professors that are famous for saying, yeah, you know, I would just skip that whole, don't get a master's, don't get a whatever. Just go straight in. You don't even need, or, you know, people that say, oh, you need a PhD before you can get an entry-level job. That's probably not true, professor. But you have those things. But sometimes you have well-meaning people. So, in Acts 21, Paul he's been to Jerusalem for the big council where they determined that Gentiles could be Christians. This is like a big deal. And then he kind of went back, and he's about to make his first trip back to Jerusalem. It's a big deal for Paul, because he used to be kind of like a murderer there, but like for the Pharisees, and now he's about to go preach against the Pharisees again. This was like a big deal. And Christians, now you got to get this part, Christian prophets. These were not bad prophets or false prophets or fake prophets. It says that they were Christian prophets who came to Paul by and through the Spirit. So they were Christian people that came with the right intentions. And they came to Paul and they said, yeah, don't go. It's way too dangerous. You're going to get arrested, beaten, thrown in jail. You could die. It's bad. Don't go. And Paul listens to them and he says, well, we don't know exactly what he said, but this is what happens. He goes, I heard from God that I'm supposed to go to Jerusalem. And the funny thing is, you might be right. I might get arrested and beaten and thrown in jail, but I know that God has called me to go to Jerusalem. So, listening to their advice, but trusting God's voice as a priority over their life, trusting God's providence that if he sends me there, he'll equip me, so he goes. Now, he does get arrested, he does get beaten, he does get thrown in jail, but God actually uses it. Some theologians would say that's where the gospel really began to spread and explain to Jews, actual Jews, what it meant to follow Jesus. Like, some people would point to that as a big moment in the growth of the gospel, which is weird because he's in jail. But what that says is, there's a step beyond just trusting God's voice. You know, sometimes we invite God's voice to speak. We even trust God's voice. But there's a third step. Paul doesn't just hear God's voice and trust his voice, but he follows God's voice. He takes it a step further. See, what Paul does is he doesn't just trust God with his head, but he trusts him with his feet. And that's a big step. It's really easy for a lot of us to say, yeah, I trust God. Yeah, I trust God's voice. Yeah, you know, I'm a Christian, that's what I do. I listen to God's voice and I trust it. But then when God says something that I might not like, or I might get a feeling, hey, you might want me to go there, or you might want me to do this with my money, or you might want me to do this with my place, then it's a bit different deal. It goes, oh, well, now I disagree with God, now, I'll kind of think about it. And it becomes the third step of following becomes the real test. Yeah, I trust him. But do I trust him enough to follow him? That's where it can get tough. So that brings me to my third point, which is, like I said, follow God's voice. And that's what it means to trust God's voice. Do we really trust him if we don't follow him? That's something that I've been struggling with. I think that's what we all struggle with. That's what it means. How much do I trust him? Would a deaf person be able to look at you and tell that you trust God's voice? They might not know you. You can't communicate with them in sign language. They just be able to look at you and go, okay, by the way that they act, they respond to what God says in church or what God says throughout the week when they see their Bible time or whatever. How do they react? Do they follow him? Do they listen to him with their actions? Because real faith leads to real action. That's what it is. Real trust leads to real action. That's what happens. And what I think is my favorite part of this whole story is when it doesn't make sense, trusting God, but following Him especially. That's the type of faith that God uses. Think about it. So let's just go through the Old Testament a little bit, just a little idea. Think about it. Moses. Yeah, you're a stutterer. Go talk to the most powerful person in the world. Tell him to let you go. That doesn't make any sense. You can just kind of imagine Moses like, that's a bad idea, but God says it, and then God frees people. The biggest movement in the Middle East of all time, that's what people say, is the Exodus. Well, let's go maybe a little farther, and you got somebody like Noah. That's a little farther to go, and he's in the desert. And he says, yeah, build a boat. Build a big one. He's like, what are you talking about, God? I'm in the desert. Like, why would I build a boat? He says, just trust me. Then he ended up being the only person with his family to live. But it's like, okay, God showcased His power through this person's faith in something that didn't make sense. I think, first off, I think the reason that is because then it proves that it can't be our power. Noah didn't know anything. It had to be God. There's no way he would have just thought of having a boat. But let's say Gideon. I don't know if you know the story, but he's about to face 10,000 men. And he has about 3,000. God's like, yeah, take it smaller. He has about 1,000. Yeah, take it smaller. You got about 300 people. Yeah, go attack him with that. Gideon's like, first off, I'm a nervous wreck. Second off, what are you talking about? And God wins. That's God's power. That's God's providence. That's what it looks like. Or maybe you got Joshua. Yeah, I know you're a famous conqueror. Why don't you just walk around the building? Do that for a week. Then blow some trumpets at it. See what happens. The walls come down. He's like, what the? That's got to be God. I'm telling you, Joshua didn't think of that. Or maybe you get Ezekiel. I know where the story's standing in a valley of bones. Just a bunch of bones. Like literally bones. And go, yeah, stand up. And they stood up and became people. God breathed His breath into them and they became full-fledged people, an army. It's got to be God. Or even in the New Testament, you got somebody like John the Baptist. Yeah, I know you got all these people following you. I know you're not sure or anything, but tell them that your cousin's the Messiah. He's like, bro, I grew up with him. What are you talking about? Like, man, we used to play like tag. How, Jesus? Like, I've kind of seen some things. He kind of walked on water in the bathtub growing up, but, like, yeah, who knows? I just thought maybe it was a special little thing. He was like, nah, do it. And he gets to be the person that Jesus says that's Elijah. That's who that is, if you're willing to accept it. God showcased power through our faith even when it doesn't make sense. That's actually what real faith is. Taking steps even when you can't see. How many of you guys have seen Indiana Jones? Does anybody like that? Woo, we got some. I don't know if you remember this part. I think it's the Last Crusade when he, obviously this is an analogy, but he listens to people and he trusts all these people and he gets to the spot where there's supposed to be a bridge, okay? And it's just like a cliff. It's a huge cavern. And he literally has no proof. He's literally looking at it and he's sitting there for a while and he's like, okay, how am I supposed to get to the other side? Like I can see it, but how am I supposed to get there? And what he has to do is he has to take a step of faith and actually just step. It's an invisible bridge. It's a cool moment. I would show you the video, but I'm not. But Indiana Jones, that doesn't make any sense, bro. And I think that's what sometimes God is calling us to do in our life. Like, we can't see it. We can't be sure. That's what faith means. Taking a step even when it might not make sense. Even when it might not look right. Even when you kind of thought it would look different. Indiana Jones for sure thought it would look different. He's like, there's nothing there, but I guess I'll step. And I think that's what God calls us to do. But maybe you're here, and you go, yeah, I missed my chance. You don't know my story. I've already tried these things and it didn't go well. Or, yeah, God told me to stay with my spouse, but I left. I can't do anything about that. Or God told me to love my kid, but I didn't. Or I was too harsh, and I can't get him back. Or something like that, something that's tough. And I want to say something that you can see all throughout the Bible. This is some good news, which is, if you're not dead, God's not done with you. It says that he's the great sustainer. It says that he chooses whether we have breath in our lungs or not. And if God's choosing to have breath in your lungs, I promise you that today he wants to use you. But he's not done with you. Whether it's for you or for others, God is not done with you. And there's always a step that we can take. Whether you're 10 or 90. Whatever you are, whether you're married or not married, whether you've been married 4 times. Doesn't matter. God can use you. There's a step you can take. So if you missed everything I just said, you kind of just slept a little bit, that's okay. But I do got one last thing. One major point that I want to say. If you don't hear anything I said the rest of the day, it's that God is calling you to get out of your boat. That's what I want you to know. God is calling you to get out of your boat. Maybe your boat is trusting God with finances. Maybe it's trusting God with your insecurity or your pride. Maybe it's fear of failure. That's an easy one. Yeah, what if I get out and, make it clear that it's going to work and then I'll do it. What amazes me is that Peter, in the midst of the storm, was the one to ask Jesus to tell him to come. And he did it. He could have said, Lord, if it's you, why don't you just clear up the winds and waves like you did last time? Maybe make it a little sunny, and then I'll come. Or, yeah, Jesus, if it's you, get a little closer so I can tell, then I'll come. We do that in our life. God, well, if you make me look this way, then I won't be insecure. Yeah, or, well, if my kids start behaving that way, then I'll love them like you said. Oh, well, if my spouse would respect me, then I'd love her. How easy is it that we do that in our life where we say, yeah, well, God, if you make it clear and you fix it, then I'll trust you. That's not what trust is. Trust is taking a step in the midst of it. The storms didn't get worse. Didn't get better. In fact, they could have got worse. But the idea is that Peter decides, okay, God, regardless of my circumstances, regardless of my situation, regardless of where I'm at, I know that the best place for me to be is on the water with you rather than in the boat without you. Sometimes what we think is safe, because it makes sense in our man-made world, like a boat, we think that's safer than being on the water with the creator of it all, the master of the wind and the waves. He's the master of the storm. We go, yeah, but he's kind of small. He's not 20 feet high. He's probably like 5'5", you know what I'm saying? Like, he's pretty small. Like, I don't know. But God's saying, I'm the master of the wind and the waves. Be with me. You don't have to be in a boat. That's fake. That's not powerful. What's powerful is me. What can protect you is me. What's safe is being on the water with Jesus. So, I encourage you, determine, what's your boat? What is it? Maybe it's something little, maybe it's something big, but I promise you Jesus is bigger. Maybe the boat's, maybe the waves are real high, or the wind's moving real fast, or the storm and the thunder's loud, but he's bigger. He's more powerful, he's stronger, and in fact, he knows. He's there with you. I might not know. I don't know at all. I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what our stuff is. It's probably stuff that you can't even speak about. Unspeakable stuff. But God's there. And God wants you to be with him. That's the safest spot you could be. That's the best spot you could be. It's where growth happens. Also, in the Bible, when we talk about growth, that's what it means. It's like at the gym. You have to stretch beyond your previous limit to get stronger. And the same with this. Sometimes you have to go beyond what's comfortable, beyond what's normal, take a risk, take a step, even when we might not want to. Even when it might seem tough or might not even make any sense. But I feel like God might tell me to. That's how we grow. That's how faith grows. Think about it. It's a step. Jesus is doing that with the disciples. He went from, okay, yeah, you're in the water. You're on a boat in the water with me the first time on sleeping. But now you're in a boat without me, and I want you to take a step. The first time they grew their faith, now they're growing their faith even more. It takes steps. And maybe you've been following Jesus a long time. And you're like, yeah, well, I followed him a long time. I've been through some storms. I've been through all the storms. I followed Jesus through some tough stuff already. I don't know if I really need to do it again. Trust me, I went through it. I believe you. I've been through some storms. Probably nothing to what you've been through, but I've been through some storms, and I can tell you it's easy to look at them and go, well, do I need to go through it again? He was there with me once. Isn't that enough to sustain? The thing is, that's what God wants. God wants you to take a step. He wants you to get closer to him, even when you've done it before and it's got hard. He wants to use you again. So, I encourage you to get out of your boat. And one last little thing. I can imagine these disciples, okay? I can imagine them looking at Peter. So at first, he's like, I'm about to get out of the boat. And they're like, what the? I can remember he gets out of the boat. Like, let's just imagine this is the edge of the boat, okay? I can imagine them kind of holding it, and they're looking over, and they're like, what the? And they see his first foot, and he's like on the water, and they're like, what the crap? And then they like kind of look again, and they're like, he must be holding the boat. And then they see him take another step, and I can just kind of imagine him like kind of clenching real hard to the edge of the boat, like, what is happening? He's taking more steps, and after a while, they're like, what? And they kind of just kind of relax a little bit. They're like, oh, Jesus got him now. What are we going to do? And they're kind of like, okay, that's freaky. And I can kind of imagine, maybe after a little bit, maybe if I was one of the disciples, sitting there, maybe I'm John, or Philip, who kind of made fun of him a little bit, or Andrew, who told him to stay back, because he loved him. And I can kind of just imagine him sitting back and going, that could have been me. I could have been walking on the water. I could be closer to Jesus right now than anybody else. Instead, he uses that old fart. He uses that old guy. Nobody likes him. He talks too much. He's the one that's willing to trust Jesus. What it says is, don't regret not letting God use you. Don't regret not letting God call you out on the water and then following him. Because I promise you, there's an area of your life where he's calling you to get out of your boat. It's so easy to stay in a boat. It's so easy to stay comfortable. It's so easy for John, for example, to stay in a boat. 10 other ones are. Why would I go out with that one dude? He's the crazy one anyway. I'm going to stay with the 10. Sometimes, what's not popular, what's risky, what's scary, what's uncomfortable, it's exactly where we're supposed to be. I mean, think about it, Peter got to be the only man in history to walk on water. Like, that's pretty cool. I wish I could walk on water. Like, I'd go run to Europe right now. I would take off. But God uses Peter, the crazy, the talkative, the weird, he's got a wife that makes more money than him, and that was like a really big deal back then. He doesn't make any money now. God used him. Heck, Jesus even called his dad different names because they couldn't decide on which one was more important for his dad, John or Jonah, or Jonas even. The idea is we can make decisions that are easy. Anybody can give a little bit of money when you got tons. Everybody can come worship and be happy when everything's going great. But sometimes when we're going through storms, is where God wants to use us. Sometimes he wants to do something through us and we say, God, use me. Use me. Do something big in my life. Make me great. Like, let me do something great for you. And God's saying, I will. You got to take a step. You've got to show your faith so that I can use you. Peter wasn't special. He didn't have any power. He wasn't extra cool or extra loved by Jesus. What he was a guy willing to take a step to where God could use him. The thing is, God will use somebody. God will use somebody. John's sitting there going, I'm the perfect one. I'm the one Jesus loves. Those are all great things. But he didn't use you there. He was the one who had faith. It's easy to kind of think, oh, well, I'm doing everything right. I'm not doing this bad stuff or that bad stuff, so I can kind of just go with it. But God wants to do something amazing through somebody that it might not make sense. Think about Billy Graham. This dude was a baseball player. He was going to go to the pros. He was good. He was going to go to the pros. He was going to get, well, for back then, it was a lot of money. He was going to get a lot of money, a big contract. God said, yeah, I give you those talents for fun. Scrap them. You're going to go preach. Billy's like, I'm pretty good. I've kind of done this my whole life. He said, no, go preach. Then he led more people to Christ. 3.2 billion people that we know of gave their life to Christ because of him. 3.2 billion. More than anybody since Paul. Didn't make sense. There were people around him. The funny thing is, he had a really close friend. Charles Templeton was his name, if I'm not wrong. Who they said was a better preacher, a better talker, more likable, more relatable, was better at bringing the word, knew the Bible better. He didn't have the faith. In fact, he says that he kind of lost his faith over his life. He might have came back at the end, but the idea was he was better. On a sheet of paper, you would have said, oh, I'm going with this Charles guy. But one was willing to take steps even when it didn't make sense. Even when it looked like, yeah, maybe I'll just go to the pros for a couple of years and then maybe preach out of it. No, I trusted God even when it didn't make sense. So I encourage you, don't regret. Don't look back and say, man, I could have got on the water with Jesus. But the storms were big. The wind was howling, the waves were crashing. It was too big. The storm was raging. It was too much. But God's saying, that's precisely why I want to use you. Sometimes I think that God leaves storms in our life so that we can get on the water with Him. Sometimes they're there so that we will walk with Jesus. That's what it looks like. He makes you brave. He makes you courageous. But yeah, so my question is, what will you do with it? Will you get out of your boat? Invite God's voice. Trust His voice over all others. Follow God's voice. Do those things. They're amazing. That's the steps. But it ultimately comes down to, will you get out of your boat? Will you get out? Will you leave the safety of what makes sense or what seems right or what other people say to follow the one who you know isn't safe? He doesn't promise safety, but He promises He'll be there. He promises that your circumstances, what we think is safe, might not be. But we know that He will. He'll be there. He'll be with you. So I encourage you. Figure it out. It can be little, it can be big. But He wants you there. He wants you on the water with Him. All right, let's pray. Jesus, I thank You for being willing to use us. We for sure don't deserve it. You could just snap your fingers and everyone in the world could be saved. It would be nothing for You. But You choose to use us. We don't deserve it, though. But we're thankful that You do choose us. We ask You to give us courage. We might be going through tough stuff right now. We might be going through stuff that we can't even tell others about. But You know, and You're with us. So give us courage. Help us to get out of the boat even when the storms are raging. Even when times are real tough and we can't see a way out. That's because You're the way out. You're the master of the wind and the waves. You're the master of the storm. So help us, instead of looking at them, to look at You. Help us to trust You. Help us to follow You. Help us not to play it safe. We want to be used by You. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. I think it's Barry. You can come and play one.